Hello, welcome to more yoga with me, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're feeling well. Actually, I hope that you're feeling tight through your hips because that's what we're going to be releasing into today. Um, I mean, hips are fun. Anybody, like when I ask for requests to a yoga class, everyone requests hips and shoulders. So we're going to do hips today. The cool thing about releasing through the hips is it ends up usually helping release through the low back as well. So you get a little uh, two for one there. For today, it is going to be maybe a lot more comfortable for you if you have something that you can kneel on, like this chip foam block, or a pillow, or even a folded up blanket, or something like that, just to give your knees a little bit more cushioning. And all depends on what sort of surface you're working on. I'm on hardwood floor under this mat, so that can be, not as comfortable as if you're practicing on a carpet at home or something like that. So let's start lying down. If that's good for you. If you'd prefer to stay seated, then by all means stay seated. And depending on how your day has been, you might need to get some wiggles out, release a little bit of tension. But eventually, if you can, find your way to a pose that feels like you can be at ease, but also that you can be still. So that might be with your legs extended, it might be with knees bent. And for a few breaths, inhale through your nose. Exhale, sigh your breath away. Couple more. Continue breathing however you need to, whether it's in and out through your nose or your mouth. Notice how your breath is flowing. If it feels really open and spacious, then acknowledge that. If you notice some sticky or choppy spots along the way, you might gently try to lengthen through those parts, just to smooth it out a little bit more. You might notice the rise and fall of your belly or your chest. The expansion and contraction of the rib cage with every breath. Last few moments here. And slowly start to bring a little bit of movement back to your body. Whatever way feels best for you to wake up. It could be wiggle of your fingertips or toes, a little rock of your head from side to side. Ooh, or a full body yawning morning stretch. And when you're ready, start to draw your knees in toward you and take a little rock from side to side. Generally, the closer you bring your knees in toward your chest, the more you're going to massage mid back. The further away they are from you, the more you're going to get into low back and pelvis. So just go wherever you need to go. And then take one hand to each knee. Let's start to draw a circle. So take your knees out wide, away from each other, down towards the bottom edge of your mat, and draw them through center. So big open circles. with knees going in the opposite direction from each other. And then let's switch directions. So go to the bottom edge of your mat, out wide, and then up toward your chest. These can be as small or as big as feels good on your body. And then shake everything out. All right, bend your knees, bring your feet to the floor, and then cross your right ankle over top of your left thigh. So a figure four stretch, pretty basic. This might be where you want to stay. If you want to deepen it, you could bring a block or something underneath that left foot. Or maybe you start to draw your legs toward you. Maybe, I don't know if you're watching or not, I'm not using my hands right here. I find it gives me a little bit more range of movement. I can rock a little bit from side to side. But by all means, if it feels good to interlace your hands behind your thigh or across that left shin, then go ahead. Maybe you pause somewhere where it feels a little bit tighter, maybe feeling a little bit more release right on the outer right hip. You could play with pressing that right thigh away from you or drawing it toward you. Try to keep tension out of the neck and shoulders, though. Last couple breaths here. All right. Now start to cross that right thigh all the way over top of the left thigh. So it's like you're sitting with your knees crossed rather than the ankle crossed. So moving into a shoelaces variation. Option to stay here with the feet on the floor, or maybe you start to de-weight your feet and draw them toward you. Now, you could just use your hands on your knees, or maybe you walk your hands down the shins. Maybe they get, oh, I'm cramping. If you're cramping, release it. Maybe your hands start to go to the outer heels or ankles. And the more that you draw your shins parallel with the floor and your feet away from each other, the deeper you're going to feel this. Notice that right hip really wants to lift up. So can you wrap it down? And for the last couple breaths, if you want to go full pretzel, then exhale, curl your nose toward your knees. Again, tension out of the neck and shoulders. And then slowly release back down. Shake out all of the tension. And then let's do those two poses on the opposite side. So cross your left ankle over top of the right thigh for your figure four. Again, this might be where you'd like to stay. Otherwise, start to draw your legs toward you. You might rock a little bit from side to side. Maybe you're just using the muscles of your core. Maybe you interlace your hands behind the right thigh. Generally easier if that one hand, left hand, reaches through the window of your legs rather than trying to wrap around the left thigh. And then pause in one position for a few breaths. Starting to release, hopefully, into the outer left hip. Okay, and then start to slide that left thigh all the way over top of the right. You might bring your right foot to the floor, or maybe you draw the knees closer toward you. Option to stay here, or maybe you start to take the feet out wide. Maybe you walk your hands down the outside edges of the shins, maybe get to the ankles or the heels. And again, the more that you're able to bring the feet away from each other and the shins parallel with the floor, the more you're going to get into those hips. That left hip really wants to lift though, so wrap it back down to the floor. Last couple breaths. If you want to curl your nose toward your knees, then feel free. I find this much more accessible on my back than it is seated. Okay, slowly, gently release your legs. Shake them all out. And then for some of you, it's going to feel great to grab the backs of the thighs and rock and roll up and down your spine. You can play with it a little bit. If you don't want to do that, then go ahead, roll to one side and press yourself up to hands and knees. So knees underneath hips, toes tucked or untucked, hands nice and wide. And let's move through cat and cow. Inhale, lift the tailbone, hollow through the lower back. Exhale, round through your spine. Press the floor away from you. Inhale, dip the belly, and exhale, round through the spine. So a couple more of these cat and cow undulations on your own time, on your own breath. Maybe there's some other natural movement that would feel really good here. So feel free to add on, moving however you need to move so that you can really get into the body in the way that it needs you to get into it today. And then slowly come back to center. Cross your right hand in front of the left. Your hand might be quite close in, it might be further away. And then as you exhale, start to send your hips back. You might be up on your hands or your palms today. You might come down to a forearm for a little bit deeper of a stretch. But the idea is that we're getting into that right side of the body. So one long line from your right fingertips all the way up the arm and down the back to the right hip bone or sit bone even. You might wag your tail a little bit from side to side. Just see if there's an angle that feels a little bit more interesting. And then slowly inhale, come back up to center, little wiggle or shake to release, and then we'll switch sides. Left hand crosses in front of the right. Again, it could be quite in close or it could be further away. And then exhale, send your hips back. Maybe you stay up high, maybe you come down low. Maybe you play with that angle of the tailbone. But hopefully feeling a release now into the left side of the body. And then on your inhale, come back to center, shake it all out. I'm going to turn to face you. And this is where, if you have blocks, it's a good time to grab them, or a little bit of padding, bring it underneath your left knee. And on your inhale, step or sweep the right foot forward. So just coming up to half kneeling rather than into full lunge. So let's start to really get into the hips now. So back out of the hips first to start with. Hug the legs toward each other a little bit. Squeeze the bum on the back leg. Belly button to spine, shoulder blades on your back, maintaining all that. Then shift into that front knee. Back toes can be tucked or untucked. And really squeeze your bum on that back leg. You might gently press the palms forward to open even more at the hips, or maybe you float the arms up to the sky. If it feels good to go a little bit lower, you could bring your hands to blocks or even to the floor. For me, I start to lose the intensity of the active release, though, the further I come down. But that's just me. Go where you need to go. Okay, on your exhale, shift your hips back as you extend through your front leg for your half splits. Now, hands could be on hips. Maybe you have a wall nearby or a coffee table that you can use. You can bring hands to blocks or fingertips to the floor. Wherever you are, really think of wrapping that left hip forward as you draw the right hip back. And then point and flex the toes on that front foot. Maybe you rock side to side on the heel, getting into that plantar fascia. And then really start to peel those front toes back toward your face. Little micro bend on that front knee or even a deep bend, but please don't hyperextend it. You don't want to, believe me, you don't want to do that and give yourself sciatica. Last couple breaths. Maybe you think of squeezing the top of the thigh to actively open the back of the knee. Holy moly. Notice how you react to moments of intensity. All right, back out of the hips, come back into that front knee, and then bring both hands inside your front foot. So you might need to heel and toe it out a little bit wider, but to start with, keep that front foot parallel. or toes pointing forward rather than out to the side. Option to stay here, or maybe to give yourself a little bit more space, spin your back shin parallel to the front edge of your mat. And then keeping your hips high as you exhale, melt your heart low. Maybe you stay here. Maybe you bring that right arm underneath the right thigh and the hand to the outside of the foot. You can use that arm to nudge the shin back into line. Maybe you spread your wings. Maybe you choose to bind over that front thigh. But the whole time, think hips high, heart low. So it's not necessarily a hip flexor stretch, right? It's more about adductors, for me anyway, on that front leg. Okay, slowly come back to center, back out of the hips, and then spin your back shin back so it's parallel with the long edge of the mat. And then heel and toe the front foot out a little bit wider, this time on an angle. And then start to shift the hips forward and back. You might even draw circles with them here. And then start to play, reach around with the hands. Maybe you go underneath. Maybe you find somewhere that feels like you're Spider-Man climbing up a wall. And that's kind of cool. I dig that. But the idea is to find somewhere that feels good on your back, on the hips. It doesn't have to necessarily look good. And thank goodness for that. Last couple breaths here. All right, and slowly again, back out of the hips, heel and toe that front foot. So it's back underneath you. And then if you're using padding like I am, I want you to shuffle your back or your knee forward so it's flush with the front edge of your block or your padding. You can use your hands here if you want to help move this right leg, but we're going to cross the right toes in front of the left knee. So toes to the floor, heel high. It's like the figure four stretch that we were doing on our backs, but now it's from kneeling. Right? It just stretches the muscles in a different way. Now, for some of you, this is going to be enough. For most of you, though, I imagine that you're going to want a little bit more. So think of shifting your hips back as you walk your upper body forward and bow into it. If you'd like to make it a little bit more active, really think of pressing those toes into the floor. Maybe rest on your forearms for a little bit more support. Just go where you need to go. And this is a really great stretch for the fascia of the sole of the foot as well. It's that time of year when we're starting to wear or make dubious choices with our footwear. As the weather improves, the sandals start coming out and the fascia of the soles of the feet can get quite tight. Okay, slowly back out of the hips. And then you can use your hand or just step that front leg out wide. And then heel and toe that right foot all the way out to the side. You want your foot and your knee more or less in line. And your right toes might be pointing forward or they might point out to the side. It sort of just depends what feels best on your ankle. And then inhale, come all the way up to gate pose. Hug the legs toward each other. Once you're up, you might need to adjust the stance on that right leg. Ooh. And if it cramps, then go ahead and take the sort of Romeo variation for a couple minutes or seconds until the hip uncramps again. Inhale the arms up to the side. Exhale over to the right. You might rest that right hand gently on the leg without jamming the knee open, or maybe hands at the hip. Spiral those upper left ribs open to the sky a little bit more though. And then inhale, come back to center, bring your hands back down to the floor, bring your right knee underneath you, remove the padding, shake it out, a little wiggle or stretch, and let's do all of that on the opposite side. So if you're using padding, go ahead and bring it underneath your right knee, and then step or sweep the left legs forward, left leg I know sometimes people say they have two left feet, but let's just bring one foot forward. And then on your inhale, come up out of, or away from the floor rather. Back out of the hips. Again, hug the legs toward each other. Squeeze the bum on the back leg, belly bend to spine, shoulder blades on the back. Maintaining all that, then shift into that front knee. Back toes can be tucked or untucked, but I really want you to squeeze the bum on the back leg. Hands can be wherever, right? Maybe you're coming down lower. Just depends, where you need to be today. If you're feeling wobbly in that front knee, drive the front heel into the floor a little bit more as you squeeze the bum on the back leg a little bit more. Because why not? Right? I think everyone has tight hip flexors, especially after this past year. Chill out on the shrug muscles. All right, exhale, shift your hips back as you extend through the front leg for your half splits. Hands can go wherever they need to go. Wrap the right hip forward, draw the left hip back. Let's play with pointing and flexing through those front toes, right? Maybe rock side to side on the heel. And then find a position where you're feeling a little bit more tension, whether the toes are peeling back toward your face or pointing away from you. I almost want you to feel, though, that you're trying to drag your front heel back toward you. It might not move, and it likely won't, but it becomes a really active variation of the release of the stretch. A few more breaths here. Little micro bend in that knee. You don't have to necessarily see it, but as long as you can feel it. Okay. Last couple breaths, rather. Squeeze the top of the thigh on that front leg. Oh, I almost got away with forgetting about it. Okay, now come forward into that front knee again. Bring both hands inside your front foot. Heel and toe it out a little bit wider, but keep that front foot parallel to start with. Spin your back shin parallel to the top edge of your mat if you like. And then keeping the hips high, exhale, melt your heart low. And again, you might stay here, hugging that knee in toward you, or maybe you bring the left arm underneath and the left hand to the outside of that left foot. You could spread your wings. You could bind wherever you need to go. But again, think hips high, heart low. And I say that, and I look at my body. I think probably my heart is only a little bit lower than my hips, but it's different than sinking the hips forward and down. Last couple breaths here. Okay, slowly back out of the hips, spin that back shin back to the long edge or the side edge of the mat, and then heel into that front foot out a little bit now, and then start to play, right? Maybe you're just drawing circles with the hips one way and then the other. Maybe you get into a position that feels kind of good, whether or not it looks good, it doesn't matter. No one's watching you. And then pause for a few breaths in your Spider-Man asana. Or maybe it's like you're playing Twister. Okay, slowly back out of the hips. Come back to center. And then heel into that front foot in slightly. Again, if you're using padding, then shuffle that front knee flush with the front edge of your padding or your block. And then step the toes of that left foot in front of your right knee. So again, toes to the floor, heel high as much as possible. And then maybe you stay here, or maybe you shift the hips back as you walk your upper body forward. You can stay up on your fingertips, or maybe you come down to forearms. That's a lot less work. And then think of sending that left knee back to the back of the room. Last couple of breaths, wherever you need to be. And then slowly Start to back out of the hips. And then step that left foot forward again, and then heel and toe it out to the side. Again, your toes might be facing forward or out to the side. Hug your legs toward each other. Inhale, come up to your gate pose on the opposite side. So again, rather left toes could be pointing, or out to the side. Some people really prefer out to the side. For me, it just feels super gnarly on the back of my ankle. So that's why I like toes forward. Hug the legs toward each other. Reach that left or right arm up to the sky. Exhale over to the left. Spiral those upper right ribs open to the sky. And left hand can be wherever it needs to be to give you the support for the side bend, but also adductor stretch. And then inhale, come back to center. Bring your hands down. Bring that left knee under you, and then shake it out. Cat and cow, a little wiggle, or release. And then shift your hips on one side so that you can roll all the way back down to the floor, starting more or less the way we began. Okay, hug your knees in toward you. Take a little rock from side to side. You might stay here, or you might choose to clasp or interlace your hands over top of the shins, getting a little bit deeper compression on the hips, a little bit more release for the low back. Mindful of compression through the belly. Maybe you stay here. Maybe you curl your nose toward your knees, tension out of the shoulders and neck. Last option is to press the shins up to the sky, getting even more flexion through the spine. All right, slowly come back down. Take your right arm out to the side. Maybe you shift your hips right a little bit to start with. Exhale, lower the knees to the left for a twist. You might take this sort of standard knees stacked twist. If you want to take a single leg twist or legs crossed, you'll get a little bit more into the hips as well as the rotation through the spine. But try to go somewhere where you can be at ease. So let the feet rest to the floor. A knee or a shoulder blade or both might be lifted off the earth, but that's fine. That's totally normal. Last couple of breaths here. On your inhale, slowly return to center. Reset your pelvis of your spine. Maybe you shift your hips left a little bit. As you exhale, lower the knees to the right. Again, as gentle or as deep of a twist as you need, whether or not it's the same variation that you did on the first side. Last few breaths here. On your inhale, slowly return to center. If there's anything else you feel like you need before your rest, a posture or meditation, feel free to go where you'd like to go. My offering for you for your pose of rest today, though, is to take your padding, your towel or your chip foam block, and slide it underneath your hips, your bum, not so much the low back, and then extend your legs out. So it's a very, very small back bend, but what it does is it helps release a little bit more through the hip flexors. You can deepen it by all means, by using a higher block or a higher pillow. So long as you don't feel like it's generating excess tension in the low back, then go wherever you need to go. But this is a beautiful hip flexors release, 5 or 10 minutes here. Even if that doesn't work for you today, then find a pose of rest that will work for you, whether it's flat on your back or resting on your side or in a seated meditation. And once you've found your pose of rest, for 3 breaths, inhale through your nose. Exhale, sigh your breath away. Couple more. And then let go of your breath control. Return to your natural breath as much as possible. Let go of any last muscle gripping or tension, particularly in your neck or your jaw. With each exhale, let your body melt a little bit deeper into the earth. Again, stay here longer if you can, 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.